A Time for Change, Chapter 7, An Unbelievable Opportunity. Amari's second day at Battery Heights High School was definitely better than her first. She realized that Jackie was right. She couldn't just expect kids to reach out to her. She needed to introduce herself and show people she was friendly. She wasn't some stuck-up newcomer from Boston. In math class, Amari met a girl named Grace. They were partners on the day's challenge problem in geometry. Amari joined Grace and her friends at lunch. They asked her lots of questions about life in Boston, her old school, what it was like to be in the North, and so on. Amari told them about her big sister and going to college in Washington, D.C. Grace was the only one at the table whose parents had both gone to college. But Amari didn't pick her friends that way. Jackie's mom was a maid. Lots of her friends' parents had different jobs: hairdresser, construction worker, waitress, etc. Amari told the girls what had happened to her after school the day before. None of them seemed surprised. A girl named Nicole told her, "Yeah, that street you chose to walk along is close to the white part of town. You'd be better off sticking closer to the shops near South Pettigrew Street in the future. Where do you live anyway?" "Miller Street," Amari said. Amari thought she saw two of the girls raise their eyebrows at each other, but that might have just been her imagination. She didn't want people to think that she was some rich doctor's kid. After all, she had to vacuum and scrub floors every weekend to get her allowance, just like most of the other kids she knew back home. Luckily, it turned out that Stephanie lived a couple of streets over in the same neighborhood. She offered to show Amari some of the shortcuts home and which streets were places she should avoid. After a couple of days of walking home together, Amari asked Stephanie a question that had been bugging her since she arrived in Raleigh. "Are there any nice shopkeepers around who sell candy? I miss getting my cherry flip sticks after school." Stephanie stopped dead in her tracks. "Really? You like cherry flip sticks?" Amari wasn't sure how to respond. After a split second of deliberating with herself, she went with honesty. "Yeah, they're my favorite. Those and Abba Zaba bars." "Why?" "You are about the only one in Battery Heights who likes them. Other than me, that is." Stephanie looked delighted. They walked a little way out of their way and stopped at the sweet shack. Stephanie introduced Amari to the owner, Mrs. Pierce. She was a nice lady, probably in her 50s. She wore a colorful apron with candy over her dress. "Nice to meet you, young lady. I hope we'll be seeing you again," she said. "You certainly will, ma'am. I love candy." Heading out from the store, Amari and Stephanie pretended to apply their lipstick-like cherry flip sticks to their lips before biting into the taffy. Then they broke out into giggles. Gradually, each day, Amari met new kids at school. She told her parents over dinner one night that making friends reminded her of making popcorn. At first, it's just one pop, but then bam, pop, 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 and then you've got lots of kernels, or friends. Amari still missed Mattapan and wrote long, detailed letters each week to Jackie, but she was starting to feel more comfortable in Battery Heights. She even got a babysitting job working for the neighbors, the Jeffersons. They had two adorable toddlers and paid well, 50 cents an hour. A few days after Amari shared the news about Dr. King coming to Shaw, her father brought up the topic over dinner. "I know you've probably been wondering about the Dr. King visit at Shaw, Amari, and I have been asking around, despite the fact that I don't know many people here yet. I was directly told that they can't get us in to participate in the student workshops with Dr. King. Given how many college students want to be part of these workshops, I'm not surprised." Amari sighed. She'd been so sure that her dad could get them in. "But," her father continued, "one of my colleagues has a brother who is a journalist. Now, there is a very good chance that the answer will still be no, so don't get your hopes up." It turned out that a couple of days later, Dr. Johnson heard back from his colleague. Amari squealed when he told her the news. She would be getting to see Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in person. They would have to sit in the back row of his press conference. But Amari was so excited, and so was her dad, truth be told. Wearing her very best dress and carrying a notebook and pen, Amari sat down in the last row of the very full room. Reporters from newspapers and television stations filled the seats beside and in front of her. When Dr. King entered the room, Amari was blinded for a minute by all of the flashbulbs going off. Then he began to speak. "This is an era of offensive on the part of oppressed people. All peoples deprived of dignity are on the march on every continent throughout the world. The student sit-in movement represents just such an offensive in the history of the Negro people's struggle for freedom. The students have taken the struggle for justice into their own strong hands. In less than 2 months, more Negro freedom fighters have revealed to the nation and the world that their determination and courage than has occurred in many years. They have embraced a philosophy of mass, direct, nonviolent action. Today, the leaders of the sit-in movement are assembled here from 10 states and some 40 communities to evaluate the recent sit-ins and to chart future goals. They realize that they must now evolve a strategy for victory. Amari took notes as fast as her hand would allow. For once, she was grateful to Mr. Thompson, who made her take such speedy notes back in 8th grade science class. She glanced at her father, who kept nodding his head in agreement with Dr. King's powerful words. Dr. King went on to speak about selective buying, where people should only buy goods from businesses that respect Black people. He said that the students needed to train more volunteers who would be willing to go to jail rather than just post bond and go free. The jail without bail tactic meant that by refusing to pay money to avoid going to jail, protesters would fill the jails and burden the resources of the state. Amari liked when Dr. King said, "The youth must take the freedom struggle into every community in the South without exception." When Dr. King finished talking, Amari and her dad stood up and clapped. So did several other people in the audience. She clapped until her hands ached. Some of the reporters stayed seating, but she was thrilled and inspired by Dr. King's powerful words. She wanted to be part of the freedom struggle. She wanted to work for justice and equality for all people. One reporter came up to Amari. He asked her, "What did you think of the speech, young lady?" "It was amazing, sir," she replied. "I can't wait until I can be part of the struggle for freedom. But for now, I'm hoping to share what I learned today with the students at my school by writing an article for the school newspaper." The man smiled. "That's a terrific idea." He looked at Dr. Johnson and said, "You've got a smart young woman here, a budding journalist and a freedom fighter. Well done." Then he headed out to the courtyard where the college students were congregating. Amari's dad leaned closer to his daughter. "I didn't know you were considering signing up for the school newspaper." She looked a little embarrassed. "Well, I wasn't really sure if they would take an unknown freshman like me, but I think a first-hand scoop from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. might give me a little extra credibility, don't you think?" "I sure do. Now, unfortunately, I'm due back in class in 20 minutes, but your mother should be waiting in my office to take you home. Thanks for coming with me, Amari. I'm really glad you pushed to go. Dr. King is an incredible speaker. He makes me believe that Black people can do anything in this nation of ours." "Me too." On the bus ride home from Shaw University, Amari told her mother all about his speech, what the reporter said to her, and how she was going to try writing for the school newspaper. She also decided that she wanted to pick up her letter writing campaign where she left off with Jackie. In her notebook, she started a list of all the changes she'd like to see in America. She planned to write letters about getting better facilities in Black schools, finding hotels or restaurants that don't turn families like hers away, getting rid of the Jim Crow laws. Amari's list grew and grew.